Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you into this morning's webinar where we're going to spend some time looking at the ACDelco WIP and/or WiseConnect integrations and the Nexpart integrations inside of our writer. So there's really two different ways that we're going to look at these integrations. The first is through these icons over here on the left-hand side in my catalog section. So looking at them standalone, a direct integration to the websites that we'd get to if you went to just www.nexpart.com and went out and used your username and password to log in. And or we're going to look at them inside of what we call SmartyCat. Those that aren't familiar with SmartyCat utilizes the Epicor catalog as our cataloging resource, but then uses our supplier connections to go out and query for pricing and availability, and allows us to do concurrent queries for multiple different suppliers at a single point in time. So we'll look at them each independently. We're going to start out with these icons that exist here on the left-hand side of my screen, where it first says Nexpart and then secondarily says ACDelco. A couple of configurable settings to look at before we actually get into the use of those icons. So I'm going to start out in the configuration module. So down here inside of configuration, first place we're going to start underneath File and then General Options is how we even make those icons appear on the left-hand side. General Options is how we'll control that toolbar down the left-hand side, and that's done in this center section, the catalog section, where we're looking at both our Nexpart and WiseConnect options. As long as those boxes are checked, when we launch the RWriter program, those icons should appear over on the left-hand side. So again, as simple as coming into General Options underneath the catalog section, and then over here on the left-hand side, making sure those icons or boxes are selected. When we then next launch our writer, we should have those icons appear. Second place we're going to go to underneath the configuration section is under the configuration header, down to repair order, and over to catalog options. We come to my catalog options window. Now, if you've never been in this window before, there's two separate sections, somewhat subtle, but if you notice, there's three options up here at the top and then a box that talks to Epicor options. So as it relates to those buttons on the left-hand side, the Nexpart and WiseConnect buttons, the options down here where it says Epicor options are not relevant. These are primarily relevant to how SmartyCat functions within our writer. It's these options up here at the top. Specifically, one that says don't show posting options screen is the one that's relevant as far as our conversation today is concerned. The use skill level when posting from catalog, only relevant if we're using a labor guide, let's say all data as an option. The exact line code part number lookup, only if we're using an integration that would look back into our inventory to do a check against pricing and availability from our local inventory. Again, the Epicor catalog or the Napa integration through CodeLink would be two examples of where that functionality would apply. It's really this option here that says don't show posting options screen. And for our purposes, we're going to leave the box unchecked just so we see that screen, or we talk about the behavior of how that works as we come back out of our out of our WiseConnect and or Nexpart catalogs. Click on OK. Last place we're going to go is underneath configuration, down to parts, and then over to suppliers. When I come into my suppliers window, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select my supplier for either ACDelco WIP and or WiseConnect, in this case ACDelco right up here at the very top. So we'll go ahead and look, and if you notice out here to the right where it says electronic ordering interfaces, this is a WiseConnect supplier. So this is telling the system that when we launch out to that ACDelco WiseConnect button, we should use these supplier credentials. Now, we can have more than one. So if you have more than one ACDelco WiseConnect supplier or more than one Nexpart supplier, that's not a problem. There is no exclusivity that's required here. However, as we get into our supplier list here, if I was to go in and look at my electronic ordering interface, when I click on edit, there's my username, there's my password, whether or not we're going to automatically post orders to accounts payable. And then if this is my primary supplier, meaning if I had 2 or 3 different WiseConnect suppliers or 2 or 3 different Nexpart suppliers, I can designate one of them as primary. The difference that makes is as I launch out to the icon, if I've got more than one, whichever one is designated as primary is the one that will be selected by default. And again, we'll see that here in just a moment as we go to use those integrations. You'll notice WiseConnect is my connection type here, and or we've got Nexpart as our connection that we're working with here. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to click on Save to cancel back out of there, and then I'm going to get back over into our writer. So as we're looking at the icons here, we've got Wise Connect and Nexpart on the left-hand side. In order for me to use either one of these icons, we must first start with an estimate or a work in progress ticket. So if I just clicked on Nexpart, it's going to give me a message box. It tells us that we have to be in a repair order or an estimate to use the Nexpart interface. So again, I'll click OK to get out of there. I'm going to open up my work in progress ticket here for Allison Swanson in her 2001 Dodge Durango. Click on the Nexpart icon now, and again, what it does is it launches us out to www.nexpart.com. It carries forward your make, model, engine, and VIN code to help identify on the Nexpart side that this is also a 2001 Dodge Durango with a 4.7 liter engine. I'm going to go ahead and expand my window here just a bit to make it a bit larger so we can see a bit more of my screen. So we're now really navigating out on the Nexpart website. So again, what we do from here, not so much under the jurisdiction of our writer, but if we came in and just looked for a simple part, I would underneath brakes and wheel bearings, and as I select my category, I'll get a list of subgroups. And on the list of subgroups, we can find a list of parts. When I click on Display Parts, it's going to stock check their catalog and tell me what parts might be available for this particular vehicle. In this case, we're looking at our primary Nexpart supplier, which does have ACDelco on their shelf. But if I wanted to add these not only onto my ticket, but into my shopping cart, I would click on Add down here in the lower left-hand corner. When I click on Add, it's going to dump it into my shopping cart. So I now see I've got one item, $33.96, in my shopping cart. You'll notice there's a button up here that says Transfer to our writer. And at least at current, that button is grayed out. I can continue to navigate through the catalog, go back and do additional searches, different part types, whatever else I'd like. When it comes time to actually transfer that information back over to our writer, I'm going to go ahead and just click on my shopping cart up here in the upper right-hand corner. And what you'll notice is when I do, the option now becomes available where I can transfer that information back to our writer. Give us just a second to let the website refresh. Then I want to transfer these back to our writer. So we're not at this point actually ordering the parts. All we're doing is we're just finding the parts. I want to add these back onto my ticket so I can build an estimate, get an approval, and then come back in and order those parts at some point in time down the road. So I'd like to transfer those back to our writer, and as I do, it's going to leave the Nexpart catalog. And this is that setting that we looked at just a moment ago in catalog options. The option said, don't show posting options screen. And I have that box unchecked because I wanted to show my posting options screen, which is what this screen is here. It says we're going to come out of the Nexpart catalog. The part number and line code are ACD 17D820MH with a description and then also a quantity and a cost. Now the list price, $94.99, is being driven by my smart pricing. Now we're going to come back into Nexpart here in just a moment because how this behaves, driven in part by this options button up here in the upper right-hand corner. I'm going to add a new labor job onto my transaction. My category will be brakes, and then my operation is going to be install front disc brake pads. And I'm going to go ahead and click on Post to RO. As I drop that back on my ticket, I'm left in my Nexpart catalog where I can now hit the X in the upper right-hand corner. And there's my part that I brought over along with the job that I had pre-established in my list of categories and labor operations on the RO writer side. As it brought across, it brought my price of $33.96 as well as my selling price of $94.99 back over my transaction. Let's go back out to Nexpart for just a moment. As we get out of Nexpart again, as we come into this window here in the upper right-hand corner, there's a button here that says Options. Click on that Options button, and when we get into the menu, it says that here are my posting options when I leave the Nexpart catalog. To the upper left-hand corner, it wants to know, well, what pricing options should I use? If I say list price, then what it's going to use is it's going to use the suggested list price that was in the Nexpart catalog. If I say price based on price markup, then it's going to say, well, I'll allow you to do a markup over the suggested list price. So if I said, well, let's do 10% above suggested list, it would take this $50.26 selling price add 10%. So in that case, you're really talking about $5.03. 55.29 would be then my selling price if I used a markup percent based upon the list price. If I use a price based upon the cost, well, then I would probably say, well, I want to mark it up. Let's just say we're going to mark it up 100%. Now, if I said, well, mark it up 100%, it says $33.96. Marked up 100% is going to be 2 times $33.96, and now we're going to sell that for basically 34 times 2, $68 less 8 cents, $67.92. If you said 200%, then it would be 3 times. So again, we can use a markup percent based upon the cost. I'm having it use matrix pricing, so I can tell the system that I'd like to use my pricing matrix that I've got established inside of my outside purchase pricing. Again, if you'd like to know more about that, we have webinars recorded, or we host them live as well that talk to smart pricing. So how it came up with my $90 price is based upon my smart pricing. Or if I'm using cost plus multipliers assigned to a department, all I have to do is define that for Nexpart. This is the cost plus multiplier we want to use for any parts that we're posting from the Nexpart interface. So the top section talks about how we want to price things. And again, in my case, I've got it using what I call matrix pricing, or really smart pricing, back on the RO Writer side. Apply pricing options to supplier list price in grid. Essentially, it says when we get to that posting box. So if I uncheck this box, then on the posting box, it'll say 50.26 as the sell price, 33.96 as the cost. When I dump it back to the ticket, that's when it would then apply my pricing. In this case, I wanted to apply that pricing the minute I get back out of Nexpart and over to RO Writer. So I'm going to have that box checked. Then down here, replace part price if downloaded price is greater than existing price. That's a little bit of a mouthful. But essentially what it says is you're going to get a suggested list price. And then in my case, you're going to get a cost. And I'm going to then use my matrix pricing to determine what the sell price to the consumer should be. If the list price that's on the website is higher than the price I'm calculating, let's use the list price from the website. So that's what I'm telling the system to do. If I uncheck that box, I can tell the system to only replace the part price if existing part price is 0. Essentially what it's saying is if I do the math and somehow I came up with 0 as the selling price, then use list price. As long as I use something that's coming from my smart pricing based upon a markup above cost, then it should never be 0. However, if I tell the system just use my smart pricing or the list price, whichever is higher, then it's going to do the assessment and figure out which one it should use. So the 0 no longer an option or an equation or part of the equation. Click on OK. When I came back out to the Nexpart catalog, where it landed is my stock check tab, because it says you've got parts that are on this transaction that were added through the Nexpart catalog. So therefore, I'm going to immediately go see whether or not they are still available at one of your servicing locations. So essentially, I'm coming back out to not only look at my additional parts, but also potentially order the part and or stock check it through the Nexpart catalog. You notice it says add to order there. So if I said, let's add that into our order, again, now I'm going to get over to my shopping cart where I'll have my order posted there. And if I wanted to order direct through the Napa website, I could go ahead and I could tell the system that I'd like to place the order. Now I've got dummy credentials, meaning these are test credentials we're using as we're going through our presentation. So I'm actually going to place the order. It would get rejected or sent back with a note that the order was a dummy order. But essentially that's our functionality that integrates into Nexpart, is navigating through the Nexpart catalog using the transfer to RO Writer button to transfer the information back over and the options that are available there in order for us to adjust the pricing. I'm going to close back out of here, and then now I'm back over to my ticket for Allison Swanson. The ACDelco Wise Connect interface is almost exactly the same. Again, what we're looking at is it's passing through my year, make, model, and engine. And I notice it brought my part over, but it says that part's not found. This supplier, in my case, my test supplier is a Factory Motor Parts, doesn't carry that part, so I don't actually want to add it to the order. I'll just go home in this case, and then it brings me back to the initial instance of my catalog where I could go ahead and do my search for whatever parts I'm looking for. Occasionally we get an Internet Explorer error message that says that it can't run a script on the page, and that's perfectly okay. Go ahead and answer no. It just means that one of these ads around here somewhere is telling us that it can't populate just based upon the version of Internet Explorer that's being used behind the scenes in order to drive the website. So again, at this point, I'm just out navigating through. So again, if I wanted to go through and look at the catalog, I could go ahead and go through my catalog, much like we did before. Because I launched out and the system went ahead and it did a stock check first, they'll want me to re-enter year, make, model, and engine. So in this case, if it's a 2001 Dodge Durango with, again, the 4.7 liter engine, once we've selected, now I can go ahead and I can look for certain parts groups, the subgroups underneath. So if I said, let's go ahead and let's just look for a particular subgroup, and then again, if I went ahead and hit display parts, it goes through and it does the stock check to determine exactly what may or may not be available. Same options that existed over in the Nexpart side, where we can define our pricing, define what happens as the pricing comes across. The same concept of we can't transfer things back to our writer until we're in the order. Now in this case, nothing in my cart, nothing to transfer back to our writer. But essentially, the two different options work almost identical as they are relating and or we're navigating through the vendor catalog and then passing that information back across. It's just a slightly different connection behind the scenes, whether we're using what's called the Wise Connect functionality of ACDelco and or using the Nexpart functionality as we go through. Now, as we started our conversation, I really said there were two different conversations to be had as these were concerned. There is the conversation about the icons on the left-hand side. There's also the conversation of what we call SmartyCat. Now, SmartyCat exists because we want to use our supplier connections and our Epicor catalog together in order to not only find parts that are available. So in this case, I'm going to just do a quick search up there at the top for an air filter. As I double click on air filter, what it's going to do is it's going to go out and it's going to check our vendors for pricing and availability for an air filter for that 2001 Dodge Durango. What you'll notice at the very top, I've got my ACDelco and my Nexpart connections that we're connecting to. Now again, just generic vendors that we've got that are using both of those connectivity methods behind the scenes. Again, if I had a specific, let's say, factory motor parts that I was going to use, that's the name we could include there, and or if there was a specific supplier using ACDelco Wise Connect, we could include that one as the name as well. But essentially, it's checked my local inventory, and then it's also checked my local ACDelco. Now, with either the Wise Connect or the Nexpart interface, what we'll often find is we're asking for a part type. Those vendors don't utilize the Epicor catalog as their primary resource. So in this case, we're kind of translating a product type and telling them we're looking for an air filter, and they'll often give us back what they're considering an alternate part number. Again, if I was to go ahead and look at any of these here, these are the air filters they have available. Here is the location where those would be coming from. So again, we can select that from our catalog, go ahead and add that back onto our ticket. Again, we'll add a new job, in this case filters, and then air filter remove and replace. So we're going to post and drop that back onto our ticket. I've got a part number there just called air filter, as well as I'd want to go ahead and reassociate my description. But we've got our part number that came through that ACDelco Wise Connect connection out in our Smart ECAT, and or if we did the Nexpart integration, exactly the same concept. It comes across back to our writer. There's a couple of nuances as far as that's concerned. Now, certainly we talk Smart ECAT in its own webinars, and we talk about Smart ECAT connection in their own webinars as well. So we won't get too deep into the actual functionality of each of those. But if we go back over to the configuration side, underneath my supplier connection, so in this case we've got Wise Connect as my supplier, in addition to just utilizing that connection in SmartyCat, down here at the bottom where if we were to click on Set Coverage File Download Options, what you'll notice is as we're going through, we can go ahead and we can tell the system how often we query our vendor for new lines and or to see if they've discontinued or are no longer carrying any lines in their system. So in this case, this coverage file, we're going to manually and automatically download it, but what I'm doing is I'm appending any new lines to the existing file. Anytime that we're using either Wise Connect and or Nexpart through SmartyCat, as I mentioned before, they don't use the Epicor catalog as part of their cataloging standard. So we're doing a translation as we're talking to those particular vendors. We're translating what's called a manufacturer's coverage list in Epicor as we're moving over into the WiseConnect system in order to try to make sure that we can see all of the available parts and part types. In order to do that, we will often build what's called an MCL, or that manufacturer's coverage list, in Epicor manually. When we've done that, we don't want to download one automatically and overwrite what's there. We'd like to just append any changes that come in. So one of the other key pieces as you're working with either a WiseConnect and or a Nexpart supplier is to make sure that we're appending any changes to that MCL file as we come back across. Other than that, it's just a matter of having them set up in SmartyCat, just like you would set up any other vendor. And again, different resources or tools available for you to talk about that particular piece of functionality.